Now for some fictional examples. Although it may seem odd to use fiction as a reference, in this case it is very helpful since many scientists use fiction as a basis for their own work. Of course they don't look to fiction for facts, but they strive to create something that will be acceptable to society, and characters like the ones we see in film and other types of media are what we expect to see in the future. Let's look at some examples.
I am C-3PO, Human-Cyborg Relations.
C-3PO is a conscious robot from the Star Wars series of films. He is defined as a protocol droid, which means he deals with interacting with people and serving them, a job which will require a high level of consciousness in order to comfortably interact with humans. Interestingly, the character consistently shows difficulty interacting with races other than humans, while the human characters seem to have few problems with the same task, which implies that while he demonstrates a high level of human consciousness, he still does not possess all of the same characteristics as a human. Another very interesting thing about the character is that he very frequently shows human emotions, usually fear and sometimes anger. When you watch the movies, you don't really think about it, but all things considered, he is an artificial intelligence, and it's hard to think about an AI having fear for harm to its own body. It demonstrates that he has a very strong sense of self, which is something a lot of philosophers argue will be difficult for engineers and scientists to replicate, but also necessary to achieve for human consciousness. Bicentennial Man is a film literally about the life of a robot with strong levels of human-like consciousness. In a way, the character Andrew is exactly what robotic engineers are striving to create. A robot with an ability to interact with humans, to think, to create, to learn, has desires and emotions, basically everything that we hope to one day make. Also interesting is that towards the beginning, the character is met with very mixed reactions from humans, varying from acceptance to rejection, which in turn shows that the robot is able to recognize and respond to human emotions with emotions of his own. As the years go by, the robot becomes more and more like a human due to technological advances, and eventually he gets to the point where he is officially recognized as a human. On one hand, engineers work very hard to try and make a robot just like this character, but on the other hand, the character causes the line between robot and human to grow fuzzy, which is something that many feel we don't want to do. The T-1000 from the Terminator series of films is a very interesting character to analyze in these contexts. The most interesting thing about him is that in terms of consciousness, he isn't too far off from where we are today. The Terminator is a slow-talking android that has very little sense of self. He possesses very weak levels of thinking and has a very small value of his own life and existence. The character of the Terminator is sort of a more realistic take in that he is still very much robot and very little human. The Terminator does have the capacity to learn, consciously trying to behave more like a human by attempting to smile and talk normally. Robots like the Terminator are much more like the philosophers expect to see in the future, a limited conscious and a human-like shell. Perhaps further down the road we will see something more advanced, but in terms of consciousness, a robot like the Terminator is a realistic goal that scientists are working towards right now. HAL 9000 is an artificial intelligence in the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. The most interesting thing about HAL is that in the context of this topic, unlike most other fictional robots, HAL does not have a humanoid body. HAL's body is basically the Discovery, the ship that he is the onboard computer of. This is interesting because most philosophers and engineers believe that a human-like body is necessary for a robotic mind to ever reach human-like consciousness. He possesses abilities like speech recognition, facial recognition, natural language processing, as well as lip reading, and the ability to interpret human emotions. Therefore, despite his physical shortcomings, HAL is still a highly advanced artificial intelligence with a very human-like consciousness. The only physical representation of HAL is his red camera eye. It is very interesting to analyze what drives HAL's behavior because a major part of modern robot engineering is to give robots a purpose. HAL is no exception. His purpose is to ensure the success of the mission, which brings about a sort of fear of death. If the mission is shut down, he will essentially die. This is a very complex aspect of the character, and it shows that he is capable of indirectly exhibiting emotion. With as much work and research that is being done in the field of robotic engineering, we still have no idea where we're headed and where we could end up 20 years from now. Fiction gives us an insight on where we think we're going. Sure, it can't really be used as a scientific reference, but a lot of what we are going to see in the future is going to be reflective of how we as a culture expect things to be. And since fictional robots are the way we view them in our minds as a result of exposure to media, that is probably what we can expect engineers to work towards. Therefore, essentially, filmmakers are kind of drawing up some early designs and templates for the real-life robots of our future. This makes fiction relevant on this topic not so much as a research source, but as a research example. We can't cite Star Wars or the Terminator as a scientific reference, but we can certainly look at them as aspects of a possible future for our society.